So Sagiliti at its core is a utility bill processor and bill payer. So we work with our Fortune 500 companies, multifamily companies, to help ingest the bills that they get, ensure that they are on the right rates, that they are, that they're receiving all of the correct exemptions and things like that for manufacturers, making sure that you know, that there are no billing errors and things like that. And when you're talking about, companies who have 100 million in utility spend, a 0.5% error rate on bills can be a substantial kind of impact to their kind of top line. And so one of the things that we do through that is just like ensuring that, hey, your bills are right. They are reliable. You can count on them. Everything is reliable and you are paying what you need to pay and not, no more. And so there are a lot of the core is just driving cost savings.
Welcome back to Renewable Rides. In today's episode, we're joined by DeVynne Farquharson, VP of Sustainable Solutions at Sagiliti. DeVynne's path into the energy transition started personally. Growing up near Pittsburgh, he saw firsthand how energy and industry shape human health. That experience took him to Carnegie Mellon, where he earned degrees in mechanical engineering and energy systems before completing a PhD in engineering and public policy. Rather than stay in academia, he moved into the private sector, first as a consultant at BCG, working across automotive and manufacturing clients, then to Form Energy, where he spent 2 years helping utilities and industrial customers understand the commercial value of long-duration battery storage. From there, he went on to independent advising private equity on battery markets and renewable energy acquisitions before landing at Sagiliti, where he now leads their sustainable solutions practice. In this conversation, we dig into what it actually takes to move sustainability projects from idea to execution, and the role of data and return on investment calculations, and how to navigate the decision-making in complex organizations, and what DeVynne has learned from sitting on both the analytical and commercial sides of the energy transition. Let's get into the conversation with DeVynne. DeVynne, welcome to the show. Super excited to dig in with you. We've been working together for a while and excited for you to be able to share your story and talk about Sagiliti and all the great work you guys are doing. Before we do, we always like to get to know our guests a little better. So what are you passionate about, either personally, professionally, or both?
Yeah. Thanks, Dan and Gareth. Really happy to be here. As Dan mentioned, we've been working together for a while and, the idea just popped into our head like, we haven't done this platform yet. So I'm excited to talk through things here with you guys. So from a passion standpoint, personally, I think there's a lot of passion, or a lot of my kind of motivation is driven by, a desire to, at its most simple form, leave the world in a better place than where it started or where you started your journey in that world. I've kind of been in the energy and environmental space for, since undergrad, really focused on that line of work. And then just really driven by the idea of, one, at its core, making, as I mentioned, kind of leaving the world in a better place. Two, tying that specifically to like health and environmental outcomes for people. And then three, where possible, and I think we in general can do a better job at this, throughout the US, but really tying things to, the equity component of work, making sure that people have, safer, from an environmental standpoint, safer, environments, more healthy outcomes for folks, and as much as possible, making that as equitable as it can be deployed.
Love that mission. And where does that come from? Tell us about your background and what really motivated you to come to that conclusion.
Absolutely. So I am from a, relatively small town in Allegheny County, right outside of Pittsburgh, called Clairton, or Clairton is the name of it. Clairton, Pennsylvania, home of like the U.S. Steel's one of the what used to be one of the biggest kind of coat manufacturers in the U.S. back in like the way before my time, the 50s, 40s or so. And it used to be like a really major town, but with the kind of industrial shifts in America and throughout, that town has seen a lot of declines, populations down like a third to like a third of what it was back in its heyday. However, the plant itself is still going. The school that there's only one school, elementary, middle, high school, all one building, but it's about a mile away from the plant itself. And so, we when we were having growing up, we'd have football practice and everything. I mean, the football practice field was literally for little league football across the street from the Coke plant. And so, as I was, growing up, I mean, my sister had asthma, my cousins had asthma. Like it's a big thing there. And so, like, just as I grew up, as I kind of got into the research and everything, I'm like, this is an outlier for sure. The asthma rates are 3x times, county and national averages. And it's just, it's something that, when you're there, when you're young, when you're growing up, you don't really see the connection. It just, you accept it. It's the way of life. But then you kind of get out and you especially you get into the science of it all and you're like, hold on now, this is kind of bad for the population that lives there. And so I think that's one of the more kind of personal driving motivators is just that, I want people to at minimum be aware of kind of the pollution impacts and things in their backyard. And so I've really gotten more into that what I guess led me into the energy and environmental space.
I can see that being a incredibly massive motivator, and one in which is going to drive you to do some pretty incredible things like you have. I mean, your professional and kind of education arc is pretty unique. You've got your PhD from Carnegie Mellon in engineering and public policy, moving on to Boston Consulting Group and Form Energy, and now leading sustainable solutions at Sagiliti. Like, talk us through that, and what are some of the key takeaways you've taken along each of those stops in your journey?
Yeah, I mean, just at the top of things there, the PhD element. I never intended to do a PhD. I don't think many people do at the onset. It really came through as I was finishing undergrad and applying for master's programs. I started to do research around the energy transition within that. And so I was doing work on, so one of my first papers published was around kind of the coal to natural gas transition and, what are the environmental impacts around that. And I think I kind of just, in a nerdy way, fell in love a little bit with the kind of deep dive modeling that you do to, arrive at certain conclusions around that. And so as I was working with my then master's advisor on doing that work, she was like, hey, have you considered doing a PhD? And I'm like, well, maybe a little bit, but not really. And so I think, as I was kind of going through that process in the PhD program, I was really able to kind of tap into, some of those intrinsic motivators that I spoke to earlier. But really a lot of it was I was able through that program and my, dissertation specifically was on, sustainable energy transitions in sub-Saharan Africa. I was able through that program to really tap into not just like what are the kind of energy transition implications in the US, but also what does that look like abroad, and traditionally what people would say, less developed countries, how are they handling that transitions? And really the idea was, all right, let's look at what people are doing from a technological standpoint to, potentially leapfrog to next gen technologies, and how are they dealing with the very real problems on their grids, and what lessons can be tied back to the US grid as it's going through its own transition, just from I guess, further along, point in that timeline.
I love the technology leap because I think you're right. You know, you go to Africa and there's no telephone lines, are there? It's all cell phone, and they completely
Yeah.
skip that whole. I think it should be the same on the energy front. What do you know, there's a lot of public pushback right now against the data centers and AI and them deploying a lot of gas generators. What's your kind of opinion on that, especially with respect to your background and your research? And
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of on one hand, the rise of AI is, of course, an enabler of a lot of kind of positive things. You have, shifts in how people learn, how quickly they're able to learn, how they're able to kind of process and digest new information. And but on the other hand, you have the very real like problem of data centers aren't just kind of able to be sited anymore, on the fringes of society. You need that, to make sure you're getting that fast processing. You need those closer and closer to where people are. I think, in an ideal world, there would always be like really robust kind of considerations of kind of externalities, impacts, and you know we all work in the energy and power space. Kind of a lot of that kind of interconnection process is really muddled by not just the regulatory aspect, but contracting and public opinions and all of that. I just feel like in an ideal world, you'd have those environmental impact studies that take into account, public voice and all of that, so that, ultimately the best outcome is a good public private partnership and like jointly arriving at citing choices and kind of constraints around it. I think right now, though, a lot of what I see at least is, pushback and pushback from community members who feel a little bulldozed,
yeah,
not included.
it's very interesting, isn't it? Because I think this is the first time in my career being surrounded by major projects where I think the industry has hurt itself because it was always very stealth and under the radar, wasn't it? And now that's
Hmm.
backfiring, and the public outreach is starting once they run into objection instead of like years ahead of breaking ground to actually understand what are the needs, wants. And I think the cumulative impact point you made is super interesting because I think a single project may have a nominal impact. But once you start layering on and how do you model that at scale is super
Yeah.
interesting. It's cool, great background. So how did you end up at Sagiliti? What was the pathway
Yeah.
to Sagiliti? And then Sagiliti's been around 30 years, and I don't think many people will have heard of the name. Can you tell us about the company and what inspired you to join?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Dan asked about the whole through line there, and I dropped the ball. But so yeah, after my PhD, just briefly to touch on it, as much as I enjoyed the deep kind of research based work and publishing papers, I felt that it was a little divorced from actual impact. And so when I was looking at, one, what are my kind of personal and professional shortcomings in terms of being able to go from, data and analysis to impact, I looked for organizations that could really help me kind of personally flex and develop that muscle a bit. And so, was looking at some of, broader kind of industry focused groups, and BCG, of course, one of those, their consulting arm. And I really sought I want to learn how business leaders are thinking about the problems that they're facing, how they are dealing with issues of kind of sustainable energy transitions, and broadly kind of balancing the economics of decision making with their target outcomes. And in my time at BCG, I was based in Detroit, focused a lot around the manufacturing and automotive industries and several other places. And so I thought that was a really kind of jumpstart to the like types of thinking that again industry leaders are exposed to. and it also gave me just a broader background in business acumen that I think is really necessary for kind of where I'm at now. That of course led me to, all right, after I experienced that, I wanted to get more into, all right, let's tap back into the more energy and environmental focus, and that led me to Form Energy. Of course, their 100-hour iron air battery technology. I'm one of the earlier employees at that company, and that was just a great time to really delve into utility modeling, portfolio dispatch, and optimization models, and really working with utilities and ISOs and some data center folks all across the U.S. And then startup ebbs and flows, and so they had a series of layoffs. And then when I was looking for, all right, what is the next step, how can I kind of really grow again, not just my experience and expertise, but kind of really grow with a company. I was doing some consulting work, worked with a couple of like PE firms and whatnot, and then I found Sagiliti. And I started with a very limited scope there. It was just like, hey, we have this idea of bringing, sustainable solutions and like essentially bringing solution providers to our client base. But we need to flesh it out a bit. And so that was my main focus, was just like, all right, they have this customer base of Fortune 500 companies, but also, multifamily groups and, large kind of tenant building organizations. Those all need help in like their sustainable transitions and kind of meeting their sustainability goals. So that was my focus. And then it grew into this broader role where I'm now kind of leading the charge in not just making those immediate connections. And then I can touch on more broadly what Sagility does at a whole, because I'm sure the 99% of the audience has no idea what Sagility does. But it really kind of hit all the check boxes of, not only am I kind of in the driver's seat and really helping to shape what this looks like in the future, but I'm helping, the major clients and groups across North America to realize some of their sustainability goals and help drive them toward the impacts that they want.
That's awesome. And love that you found a home where you can build, and not just build within the company, but build the industry as well. What does Sagility do at the core? And then what are some of the things that you're particularly layering on?
Yeah. So Sagility at its core is a utility bill processor and bill payer. So we work with our Fortune 500 companies, multifamily companies, to help ingest the bills that they get, ensure that they are on the right rates, that they are, that they're receiving all of the correct exemptions and things like that for manufacturers, making sure that that there are no billing errors and things like that. And when you're talking about, companies who have 100 million in utility spend, a 0.5% error rate on bills can be a substantial kind of impact to their kind of top line. And so one of the things that we do through that is just like ensuring that, hey, your bills are right, they are reliable, you can count on them, everything is reliable, and you are paying what you need to pay and not, no more. And so there are a lot of the core is just driving cost savings. And so what my group, the Sustainable Solutions Group, does off of that is, because we've been working with a lot of these companies for decades, we have a plethora of really reliable utility data. And this is at the facility level. And so we are able to kind of assess those bills and leverage the data to drive credible action plans to help meet their sustainability goals. In many cases, we try and work as closely as we can with their sustainable energy managers or what have you. It certainly varies by organization, but we try to work hand in hand with them to not just kind of recognize where there are low-hanging fruit, but kind of that second order of, how can we really build a meaningful strategy around your approach to sustainability, around your approach to, reducing your electricity use, your gas use, your water use, based on the data that we are seeing, not just at your facility, but kind of when we zoom out and kind of try and leverage the aggregated data that we have. We're really in a position to drive, meaningful conversation around solutions and opportunities that people might not have seen by only kind of looking at their own portfolios.
That's great. And what are you seeing as you're doing all of that work? What are you seeing as being the biggest misconceptions or barriers to people wanting to assess and then enact the recommendations you're making?
Yeah, I mean, transparently and honestly, I think it's in many cases cost. And that's where I think the beauty of our business really shines through is that we, through the kind of utility bill pay and processing standpoint, we are able to drive meaningful real savings that can then be leveraged to funnel right back into kind of retrofit projects that can be funneled into your sustainability goals and that. And I mean, at the end of the day, these are businesses and ROI matters. You have your sustainability goals, but you need to, ensure that there's ROI there. And I think through, our rebate management processes, through our kind of tax allocation, studies to make sure you're, receiving your your manufacturing exemptions and whatnot, we're able to drive that investment into their, into their sustainability goals and help them reach their water, electricity, and gas reduction targets.
And DeVynne, are you seeing that companies are able to actually ring fence that money so you are able to say, we've helped you save X amount of dollars by getting your bill right, maximizing all the rebates and send? Do you see that they're able to then ring fence that and then deploy it and sort of use almost like an evergreen fund to invest in these assets, or is it a lot more complex than that?
That's a really good question, and I'd say it's a lot more complex than that. I mean, what I'd say is maybe a better kind of through line is that the savings that we kind of enable provide credibility and trust that then lead to, okay, if they've given us, $100,000 here, $200,000 here from their work, maybe we can trust what their recommendations are on the energy and utility consumption reduction efforts. And so I think that's more the through line. Of course, it never hurts when you can say like, hey, in 2025, I saved you $1.2 million on your utility bills. That is money that can then go into, retrofits or new lighting or what have you. That's always a positive.
Can you talk us through? So you guys are sitting, as you said, on a mountain of data and hence, our work together, a lot of that data is key inputs to helping people understand on-site generation and storage. But whether it's, on the energy side of things, the gas, the water side of things, like, can you share an example of the type of projects you've been able to push with, someone might not even know that something is possible, but when you look at the data, then you proactively come to them and say, hey, were you aware that this is a pathway that you can go down? What's an example and what's the reaction been when you do that with customers?
Absolutely. I mean, one example that is kind of closer to my work specifically, we've working with a major client on their kind of facility level water reduction goals, for instance. And they had been approached by several kind of vendors promising like, oh, yeah, we can drive savings for you, et cetera. And not to disparage them, they may have been able to, but it's different when you're essentially we found a vendor that we thought, hey, we did our research into them, did a kind of assessment of their technology and their case studies, et cetera, found that, hey, this kind of modified check valve is actually driving significant, water savings for other groups. Let's kind of dig into your specific water bills. What is your water spend? What percentage of that is variable and not, the fixed portion just to provide you service? And through again having that data on our hands, we were able to do like a portfolio wide sweep of what does the variable water spend across these various facilities look like. Pinpoint two or three, like, hey, these are really high variable water spend here. And then the solution essentially was a solution, eco valve, to help reduce the air pressure and this is not my area of expertise, but through that solution, we were able to kind of install it and pilot it. And ultimately, it led to 21% reduction in water usage intensity for that client site.
Amazing.
And so it's like, the solution existed, it was there, but based on our kind of trusted relationship with folks and the data that we had on hand, we were able to hyper focus on what are the right deployment opportunities for this solution. And that's the kind of work that the data enables. It is not just kind of a broad shotgun approach to energy solutions. It is, hey, we will kind of walk hand in hand with various vendors to figure out what are the right, what is the best ROI for you? What is the best opportunity for energy and energy, water, and gas savings? And kind of not hand pick, but craft really meaningful and thoughtful proposals around savings opportunities.
Yeah, I think this is the beauty of our alignment, isn't it? Is both solution agnostic. You've got trusted relationships, you've got the data, which is often a brutal part of people actually executing, is just even getting access to their data and then being able to represent the customer's best interests and bring them options and solutions that drive value. So good. You've got a range from manufacturing through to multifamily. How do you manage that diversity of customer base, and what are the biggest differences you see in process thinking, investment strategies?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely, those are two verticals that are vastly different: commercial, industrial, and then the kind of multifamily and tenant space. I mean, it's kind of an easy dichotomy for a few reasons. So one, on the manufacturing side, I mean, most of these organizations are so not complex, but so well structured that in many cases we are supplements to their existing team. We act as a kind of advisor and trusted, a trusted advisor to ultimately kind of make recommendations, align with their priorities. And so when it comes to those folks, on that manufacturing side, we provide services that we think are, really quality, the tax exemption studies and things like that we think we do better than, pretty much anyone else. But we act as a partner in those organizations. When it comes to some of the multifamily and tenant side of things, we take a more active approach with those folks, oftentimes just because the infrastructure within the institutions are a little leaner. They're a little kind of more light. And so we're able to leverage a lot of the kind of collective experience of our teams to take a more active role, to be, in some cases, on the ground project managers ourselves for some of the, retrofit and energy and water savings opportunities for those folks, which also means there's kind of a difference in the geography of who we kind of serve. When it comes to the commercial and industrial, we have facilities that we work with in all across North America, Canada, of course, the most in the US, and then Mexico as well, because that's where their manufacturing, occurs. And so we, can serve them through a lighter, but not necessarily less customer centric approach. But with the multifamily side, Sagiliti is based in the Minneapolis area. And so the bulk of our clients are in that Midwest side of things with the multifamily piece, just because that's where we can kind of be more hands-on, send some of our certified energy managers and whatnot out to those locations to help those folks along. But ultimately, it's a partnership with across all of the groups. And I mean, we take learnings from the manufacturing side when applicable, and try and think through that with the multifamily folks, and then vice versa. I mean, it's not all, you won't always find an immediate one-to-one, but hey, we try and think about the big picture.
Absolutely. Well, you're relatively early in developing this kind of offering, this program, the Sustainable
Yep.
Solutions Group within Sagility. What do you see? Kind of what are some of your personal and or organizational goals in the development of this program over the coming couple of years? Whether that be the verticals that we were just talking about and kind of penetrating those, or the offerings that you bring to them. What fast forward, a couple of years, what do you want this kind of organization within Sagility to look like?
Yeah, I mean, at its core, I kind of take my mandate from the early principles of consulting. I think of it as, this is my job to provide leverage for you all. And so when I'm working with commercial, industrial, or multifamily folks, the idea is the same. I want to help you achieve your goals without you needing to kind of shoulder a bunch more of that burden or load. It is kind of our job, our task, my team's task, to figure out what are the things that you aren't seeing. Of course, you all have your kind of 2030, 2040, 2050 plans. How can we help accelerate those when possible? How can we kind of help free up some capital for you on that utility billing side to drive some of these investments and move some of these projects ahead earlier? And then when it comes to, the relationship like ours, identifying solutions, I think that's really where it's, these companies, especially the Fortune 500 folks, they're inundated with outreach from various solutions all the time. They just can't process all of the opportunities. But we sit in a really unique spot there with the data on hand, with the trust of our clients, to be that kind of matchmaker and role player. And so that's really where I've been, driving my team towards is, we have the data to be able to really leverage deep insights around what technologies work and what are the kind of economic thresholds that need to be met for a solution to work, not just across the portfolio, but at individual facilities. And so because of that, I think my focus and goal is, hey, I want to do my job so well that like our client partners don't even have to second guess. If I put a solution in front of them, they know that, yeah, DeVynne and team have done the diligence on this. They have kind of vetted the opportunity, and they vetted it specifically to our needs based on our kind of conversations that we have with them in the context built. And so that they can just focus on the economics of it. Does this make sense? What are the go, no go criteria? And, then, my goal is just to let the two meet and hash everything out from there.
That's great. We obviously talk a lot on the show about the energy trends and what's the risks and the opportunities, but I don't think we're very familiar with water, gas, some of the other utility trends. What are kind of the key observations you're seeing in those markets? And are there any low-hanging fruits that you're seeing your customers really leaning into?
Yeah, I mean that's where it really differs by who you're talking. I think on the multifamily side, I mean we see a lot of our direct water savings and things like that actually on the multifamily side, just because I mean this is America. Every building, every city, every jurisdiction is different, and so as you are kind of if you're dealing with like a senior housing facility and all of the kind of operations that they have versus a high rise building with that's just a standard apartment building, there are so many kind of old and poorly thought through designs around the water infrastructure. And so the low hanging fruit, specifically for water, I think is just in that multifamily space. And it is, everything from like, I mean, really minor things like toilet flappers not being properly calibrated or being old. I mean, that can drive in a, 100 unit building, that can drive, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands in water savings alone in a year. And then with the commercial and industrial folks, I think that's more so, we can drive water savings, and we certainly do and impact that, but that's mainly through external solutions that we kind of vet and identify. There's a big piece just on gas and the fluctuation of gas prices and all of that that we help actually with energy. That's where we're a little bit more direct on the cost of that through energy procurement activities. Making sure that they're getting the best gas contracts and things like that. And then again, through our external solutions, trying to identify ways that a lot of people are actually looking at moving away from gas generation. They're trying to reduce their gas generation altogether, and be that through heat pumps or other sources. I think there's a big appetite in the industry for of course, couching everything in the economics, for moving away from some of these traditional, historically connotated as dirty, fuel options, and moving towards, cleaner, more efficient and renewable opportunities. And so that's where we step in to help out and guide folks.
It's hugely valuable, and I think that's one thing what we find, and it sounds like you're finding the same. Most people don't even know what opportunities are available, or what that there's even solutions to the challenges that they might not even know that they have as a challenge or a problem. Yep. until you dig into the data. So love what you guys are doing. Love seeing how you're able to impact change and action based on the underlying data about their facilities. Let's shift into the power surge. If you could be any energy technology, or maybe let's expand it, any sustainable technology, because you do sit across not just energy but others as well. What would you be and why?
I mean, I'd have to go with just battery technology, battery storage, just because that's the kind of battery connection there. And I think the why of it is really in just like, battery storage isn't I guess more so it has become a little sexy technology. But I mean, what it's really about is just the reliability. I think, batteries are in many ways the kind of key transitional element from where we were in a fossil fuel heavy kind of grid to the clean generation of solar, wind, and non-emission producing generation sources. They are in many ways the pivotal technology. If we can get batteries right, if we can get those costs down, then wind, solar, and hydro, where feasible, can kind of take the core of manufacturing and grid use completely drained. And so I see it as, if I were a battery, then I'd be a part of that kind of core reliability and integral integration that enables the kind of energy transition fully. So I go with that.
Asthma-free battery. I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. And finish this sentence for us, DeVynne. In my life, I will have been successful when.
So I'd actually say, in my life, I'd be successful when, not at like a macro level, but at a really personal level. When, I feel that, myself, my family, the loved ones that I have around me are all kind of like comfortable. The family that I have back home in Clare, that their air is cleaner, and they, asthma rates are lowered. I think that's what I'd have to say. I mean, professionally, I don't know if, I don't know if there's ever like oh yeah, I will feel successful. Like, oh, I've done that. It's, I'm checked there. Cause I think I'm just really, I want to contribute, I want to, I feel like I've been like, able to navigate my way through fields where I'm able to like really drive meaningful impact. And I don't think there's ever going to be a time where I'm like, well, the impact that I wanted to achieve is done. I want to continue to help people, reach their sustainability goals, decarbonize the grid, and like really recognize the immense kind of strides that they can make when partnered with the right groups and solutions. And so I don't know if there'll ever be that on the professional side. But personally, if my family is healthy and happy, and that's all I need.
I love the deep personal connection and nature of your motivation and drivers, and I think it resonates, and hopefully we can bring more equity to the energy landscape and communities like those that your family is in and that you grew up in. And I love the work you're doing. I love working together, and thank you for dedicating your time to this. And again, I'm sure your family is equally thankful. But yeah, thanks for taking time to join us today and for sharing your story with our listeners.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure, actually. Really enjoyed it.
Love it. Thanks, DeVynne.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Gareth, it's always nice to talk to someone that has some deep-rooted passion about the work that they're doing. I know that for me, as I've shared a couple times, like the drive around the energy transition and addressing the wildfire challenges here in California is what gets me up every day and excited about the work that we do. But I can see how someone like DeVynne, seeing the firsthand effects on the health of his family members, can light a fire under someone.
Yeah, I can't imagine growing up next to a coal plant. It's kind of crazy, isn't it, to think that was ever acceptable, and today that it still is. And for me, it was the same. Inspiration is seeing these massive flare stacks billowing out, horrific black smoke, which you knew would be very toxic, miles and miles of oil spills as far as the eye could see. These are some of the consequences of getting access to energy security, and it's not necessarily acceptable or necessary anymore. And I think I love the motivation. Yeah,
I think future generations will look back at the generations of our time and before us, thinking that we were absolute barbaric.
Yeah.
So
no, I love it. I think having that drive every day and that personal connection, and it sounds like he still does, is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what else stood out to you?
Yeah, for me, I think I love the synergies, because the critical aspect here is trust, isn't it? Because a lot of businesses haven't gone down these roads before. They've not thought about it. They've not done it. So they're nervous. And so having a partner that they can trust, having a partner that already has access to a lot of their data that can often be very hard to find and aggregate and make sense of, it's a huge step up. And then the key is, collectively, how do we bring that agnostic, independent, high value advice to actually inspire people to then make decisions with confidence? And I think there's a huge amount of synergies there between the way our businesses think, and I like their approach. And I think more and more companies are going to want and need this, because they don't want to be sold to by someone who's trying to sell them the widget or a service. They want someone to help guide them on the highest return on investment decisions.
And it can be overwhelming. Like there's so much data that is sitting out there that in their case around utility consumption and billing and how they could be doing things better. And most businesses just don't have the resources or capabilities internally to try to go mine that data and figure out where the opportunities are. And so it's upon us to figure out making sense of that and highlighting the pathways and opportunities and also where the noise is and where they shouldn't be spending their time and effort and focus. So I agree, and let's go find the wins and go build on those wins and then build programs around it.
Yeah, it's amazing to think, isn't it? We think energy is a full-time job, and then if you layer on gas and water and waste and all of these other opportunities, the key is like, where are you going to get the best bang for your buck, and cutting out all the noise of all the other potential stuff, but having a systematic process to work through it. So yeah, really, really great conversation.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate DeVynne's time, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Yeah, good one.
See you guys.
We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks, and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at VECKTA.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs, and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself, and the VECKTA team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.